From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Kansas Week.
Coming up on Kansas Week, a look at the hours-long lines at the Sedgwick County tag offices. We'll tell you about the perfect storm of problems forcing long waits and why you are footing the bill. Also, more legal and financial trouble for Spirit Aerosystems and Boeing. What will it all mean for the future of Wichita's largest employer? But first, the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk ignites a firestorm of controversy right here in Kansas. One state employee is fired, a county worker under investigation, all as hundreds gather to mourn and call for peace. That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. Good afternoon. Welcome to Kansas Week. I'm Jared Cirillo. Last week's assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk is igniting a firestorm of controversy right here in Kansas, leading to the firing of one government employee and the investigation into another. Katie Allen, a research analyst for the Kansas Department of Education, was let go after commenting on social media that Kirk's killing was, quote, well-deserved. Meanwhile, a Sedgwick County firefighter is also under investigation for posts mocking the death, sparking a fierce debate over the free speech for public employees. But as the controversy swirls online, hundreds gathered for a solemn candlelight vigil at Wichita State University Tuesday night, where speakers remembered Kirk and called for a return to civil discourse in America. Here to discuss this and some of the week's other news is conservative political consultant Ben Davis, Wichita Eagle opinion editor Dion Leffler, CAKE senior political reporter, journalist Pilar Pedraza, and Wichita City Councilman Mike Hoheisel. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. Pilar, I'll start with you as a journalist. How has it been covering this story? This is a huge story. And a full disclosure, I'll admit, I did not even know who Charlie Kirk was before this happened.
I was very much in the same boat where I was not really aware of who he was as an individual. I had heard of Turning Point USA. I was aware of them as a college organization and stuff that didn't want to talk to the media and was on the conservative side of this political spectrum. That's really all I knew about them before all of this. I was speaking with a state senator, Republican state senator, the day after, and he told me that's pretty much all he knew about it too. He didn't even realize his own wife was a regular listener to Charlie Kirk's podcast. And his wife was somebody he considered to be extremely apolitical. So it's one of those things where a lot of people didn't necessarily even know who he was. He wasn't as big of a name as he has become now. This has made him a household name at this point, and that's going to, I think, change kind of the landscape in our country quite a bit in ways we can't foresee right now. Ben Davis, as a political consultant, Republicans for years have been calling on civil discourse, and even through this, Republicans have been calling on civil discourse. Are we anywhere close to civil discourse at this point right now, or?
Probably not.
I don't think so.
Unfortunately, maybe fortunately, depending on where you are with all of this. I actually, when I heard about the news, I had just left the White House. I had meetings in the West Wing last Wednesday morning and had left, and then got the news that he had died, and then was walking over to another place that was revered him, knew him, had a close relationship with Turning Point. So that it was really, really hard for many of us in the conservative movement, and especially so for younger. If you were, under the age of 35, definitely under the age of 30, odds are you had heard of Charlie Kirk, especially if you were remotely interested in politics. The Turning Point movement was massive in this country and will have huge ramifications politically, culturally and politically for at least a generation.
Council Member Hoheisel, as a local lawmaker, as a local politician, how has this story affected you as a city councilman?
Well, I'm sure you can relate as well. Anytime something like this happens and you start getting the death threats from all sides, you think about your family, you think about Charlie's family, you think about the family of the lawmakers in Minnesota. You start thinking about just a civil discourse in this community and in this country and how far we've come. I was just recently at a military civic engagement tour, and I got to watch the swearing in of many of the airmen who had gone out there and served. And I was just reflecting on, we don't know what their political ideologies are. They're out there just to serve. that's the service that I wish for America. That's the service that I wish that we could all have. How do we make our communities better? How do we engage in our First Amendment rights? So it's a weird time right now. I think social media drives a lot of it. We don't look at each other as human beings anymore.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate.
And and Dion, as I move to you, we've been seeing a lot. The story that we talked about was about a Kansas educator losing her job or being reprimanded, a firefighter being reprimanded as well. On a national stage, we're seeing things like Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert, because of their words, whatever they said about Charlie Kirk, being forced off of the air, basically. How could anyone look at this and not say that it's state-sponsored, that it's not state-sponsored censorship that's what's going on here? Because of what they said or what they may have said about Charlie Kirk.
Well, I think there's some nuances here. When you talk about the Jimmy Kimmel incident, coming on the heels of the chairman of the FCC threatening ABC's broadcast licensure unless they removed him, that is a very, very dangerous road to be on. We cannot exist as a democracy if the government can, basically force individual organizations to cancel
But
people.
CBS was also in the same boat, they're in the middle of a merger right now that the FCC has to approve.
Exactly.
All of a sudden, Stephen Colbert, who has been a very staunch critic of President Trump, is forced off the air.
I think what stands out more with the ABC situation, speaking as somebody who works at an ABC
Sure.
affiliate, is that it was much more, people can draw the line directly. They heard the comments from the FCC chairman, and then they immediately saw the reaction from ABC. The FCC chairman never even had to necessarily talk to ABC. But with the license threatened, ABC loses the license, all of their stations lose money, big time. And so that is a major issue, and that really is something that, in my opinion, as a private journalist, not speaking for my company
Sure.
at all, needs to be investigated exactly what happened there, because that does have very dangerous implications if what we think happened from what we heard actually did happen. We don't know that. We do know that a private employer can control their employees'
Absolutely.
speech. Free speech does not cover
Right.
what an employer-employee. It covers government, private citizen. Those are two different things.
Yeah, Ben, let me ask you the question, though, what I talked about again, and Pilar brought it up, was President Trump even mentioned today the possibility of pulling ABC's license. How?
Yeah, so I think we could get into, and I would disagree with what AG Pambondi said earlier, that if you have these certain rhetoric, we're targeting and coming after you. I'm hoping that she walks some of that back. It was more of a heat of the moment kind of thing. I do think that there is a distinction between having consequences for what you say, and that private companies can indeed do
Sure.
that. And there were a lot of affiliate companies that were saying, look, this guy has already lost a ton of ratings. He's outright lying, like the whole thing that this shooter was somehow indoctrinated by MAGA was absolutely proven false from the very beginning, and he was going to double down on it and do it. Now, there are protections. You can lie, but if in the moment that he said it, if the company has a right to say, look, this is so beyond the pale, and you're out of here. Nothing so far has been ironclad proven that the government was the one pulling the strings on this thing.
So
If
I
it
think there
is
needs to
proven
be
that's the case, then that certainly muddies the waters, and I'll be the first one to say it. But until that's the case, then what it seems now is that a private company took action against Jimmy Kimmel.
All right. Spirit, go ahead. Did you want to say one more thing, Dion?
I did want to talk about one more thing,
Sure.
which is the state and local government employees.
Sure.
In this, there's the state of Kansas. If somebody decides to sue the state of Kansas, they would probably have a pretty strong case, because the state of Kansas has, for years, tolerated the exact same conduct, in fact, worse conduct, by members of the Westboro Baptist Church, who work for the state, and on their weekends, they go to funerals and say horrifying things about the people who are dead or their families. And
that's a good point.
So
that's a good point.
We'll just have to see how that works out. I don't know how aggressive these people are going to be in enforcing that, but we'll see.
My granddad used to say, Fair and consistent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Try and be fair and consistent.
sure,
So.
Yeah.
Moving on, Spirit Aerosystems will pay nearly $30 million to settle a class action lawsuit brought by investors who claim that the company misled them about ongoing safety and quality issues on the Boeing 737 MAX. The settlement comes as Spirit's future parent company, Boeing, faces its own regulatory heat. The FAA is proposing $3.1 million in fines against Boeing, citing hundreds of quality violations at both Boeing and Spirit plants, including allegations of pressure on employees to certify jets that did not meet standards. All of this comes as a separate $200 million resettlement between Boeing and investors over the original MAX crashes remains unsolved. You know, this is interesting as well. Dion, Boeing and Spirit. Boeing is so big. Is it possible that Boeing could fail? And if that, because of all of this that's going on, so it's hard to fathom that could happen. But with all of this happening, could Boeing fail?
I think Boeing is too big to fail. I think.
Well, that's what we said about banks about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And we bailed a lot of them out.
Yeah.
And we bailed them out.
We did.
And that's probably what's going to have to happen with Boeing. I mean, if we lose Boeing, we lose an edge that we have on every other country on this globe in terms of, production of military aircraft and production of space aircraft and production of civilian aircraft. And I just don't think that can be allowed to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, if you put it in perspective, 200 million, 3 million, 30 million, that sounds like a lot to us.
Sure.
But this is a company that after all of the fallbacks that it had, all the problems that it had last year, still made a $62 billion profit. 230 some million dollars, all of them put together. I'm sorry, that's a drop in the bucket for them.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's true. Ben Davis, tell me your thoughts.
So this is really unfortunate how we got to this place, and I think my heart goes out to the families, which I know they've taken settlement money, but it's not enough, which
Yeah.
it wouldn't be enough, and they're saying
There is no
we
enough.
deserve the right to have criminal proceedings against these companies, which I think is absolutely should be on the table, and I think that they need to take a really hard look at that, because what they did was criminal, and that with all due respect to good, honest people who are working the line or doing whatever at these companies that are here in Kansas and around the country. But there needs to be some serious investigations, and I think this is an area where regulatory entities need to come in and take a really hard look at this. On the financial side of it, that's one thing. As somebody who hates to fly personally, I'm like, I hope you take a really hard look
Yeah.
at this, because people's lives are at stake, and there's a lot at stake here, and I hope they do the right thing.
Yeah, council member?
Yeah, obviously it's a very high interest of us here in the Wichita community with the possibility and the probability that they'll be coming here. The future of aviation is bright by every economic outlook, but Boeing does have a lot of work to do to get their house in order for them to continue and succeed going forward. And quite frankly, our community depends on that, and our country depends on
Yeah,
that.
our country depends on it just because they want to know that they're flying in a safe airplane. And I, as I don't fly very much, but I did fly a year or so ago, and I'll tell you what, booking those tickets, the first thing you think about is that a Boeing plane I'm going to be flying on, or a 737 MAX? So we have to make sure that we're making sure our skies are safe, Dion. Yeah.
Well, and let's go back to the original sin here. The original sin was the sale of the Boeing Wichita plant.
Yep.
That was the touch point for this whole thing, which the management that was then there, they did that to get out from under labor contracts that they didn't feel were disadvantageous to them. And so we've gone through this whole thing, and then cost cutting, quality drops off, those experienced workers were laid off, and it's been downhill ever since. And now that they're buying the plant back, hopefully that'll bring about, that'll bring the standards back up and bring their reputation back up.
So
Well,
do
you
you
have to wonder too, with them doing a little bit of the plane here, a little bit there, a little bit in
Right.
Mexico, a little bit in China, a little bit
Right.
wherever. They've got it all over the place and they're shipping things back and forth. It just increases the probability of an error being made rather than when you're building it in one line in one factory.
Yeah, we have some of the greatest workers here. Our community does a lot to invest in training programs and education
Spirit's in your
programs.
district, by the way.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So what we need to do is we need to support those workers. We need to support the quality that we know that they're capable of. We need to insist that that quality, it's of the vital importance. Just like you said, everybody gets on the plane now, and where's that door plug at?
I will say, just maybe coming back full circle a little bit, this seems to have been one issue out of the hundreds of issues that seem to divide us. At least if you go back and you look at a lot of the Senate hearings with Boeing and some of these other major aviation companies, where you see, conservative Republicans like Josh Hawley taking just as much of a hardline stance against what's happening here as you would somebody on the extreme left. And so all of these people are flying to back home to their states and everything else. And this is a huge thing. I think, the tragedy that happened earlier this year with the plane flying out to Washington, D.C. was another one that seemed to bring people together. I hate that these types of things are what bring politicians together, but I guess we'll take what we can get, and hopefully we can get some really good, solid bipartisan action to make sure that Boeing is not only doing the right thing, the safe thing, but can keep us, to Dion's point, on a good economic trajectory, because it is a huge advantage that we have with the rest of the world.
Right. Our next story, hours-long lines and frustrated drivers have become the norm at Sedgwick County tag offices, with some people lining up before dawn. The county treasurer says a perfect storm is to blame. A mandatory 5-year replacement law for personalized plates, combined with the massive popularity of the new blackout plate. Those factors have led to a 400% increase in foot traffic, overwhelming an outdated state computer system. Now, local leaders are demanding the state step up as the county is forced to subsidize the offices with nearly $1 million in property tax revenue. Ben Davis, I have a hard time buying this excuse that the popularity of blackout plates is responsible for this.
This is completely ridiculous. So, this is just another example, I'm sure, of many that we could identify here, where the government is giving us all these regulatory things, and then they make it almost impossible to get through the system. So this is like a core service, like public safety would be, of government, and of course they're not performing well. With all due respect, I know you're an elected official here, but this just lends more credence to my side here, that we need way more efficiency. We need to be examining all of these things, and we need probably doing cost-cutting measures and going towards things like updating computer systems and things like that to make sure that look, we're in the age of AI, and you're telling me here that we have outdated computer systems and we've got lines and all of this stuff. It's really ridiculous, and I'm not buying the BS arguments.
Yeah. But it really does come down to the computer systems. The others, I agree, are just kind of icing on the cake. They may be contributing, making the problem a little bit worse, but the real problem is the outdated computer system. And it's very similar to what we saw, Dion, during the pandemic with the Department of Labor. It's a system that is decades old, was old when I entered the workforce, really.
Yeah.
And it is an ongoing issue. Unfortunately, it costs a lot of money to make that initial change. In the long term, it will save state money, I agree. But in the short term, it costs a lot of money to make that change, and that's why it keeps getting put off, I'm sure.
Dion?
Well, a lot of this is efficiency initiatives in the first place, because we've gone from having like more offices, more staff. That's all been tamped down a little bit. Now, when we look at the license plates themselves, they had a big machine that printed out those plates in the office while you stood there, and they handed them to you. And now that's all being done through Topeka.
Right, one place in Topeka.
Yeah, so that's all being done through Topeka, and that was an efficiency improvement. So it doesn't necessarily help to centralize everything like they've done, and it just seems like they've added steps to the process that really didn't need to be added.
Yeah.
Which is counter efficiency. Adding steps to a process is not efficient.
But they called it that.
Yeah. So everybody needs to check their definition of what efficiency means. And what we have now is a massive convoluted government mess.
Yeah.
I agree with Ben on many of his points. And it also shows the difficulty between the county and the state, their relationship, because county has to pick up the slack for a lot of the regulations that the state has. I actually did speak to a commissioner recently, and they talked about expanding the territorial aspects of us. And that way, you don't have to strictly go to one DMV in order to get some of this processing done.
Yeah, we actually talked in the newsroom about how some people will go to Butler County to register their vehicles because it's so hard to get through Sedgwick County.
Yep.
Can I talk about California for a second?
Go ahead, Dion.
My old stomping grounds.
Was it done better there?
Well, depends on who you were. The DMV lines, I mean, what we're talking about here, I mean, sorry, Kansas are wimps when it comes to DMV lines. It's like California is legendary for that. But the way they solved it was they cut a deal with the AAA Auto Club, and you can do your registration and stuff through AAA. You have to pay a little bit extra for the convenience. But, I hadn't set foot when I left California, I hadn't set foot in a DMV office for 10 years because I could just do my stuff over at the AAA and just, you have to buy a AAA membership. So anyway, I just throw that out there that there are other possible solutions than, just a state-run system.
Understood, yeah. As rural communities struggle with a lack of mental health resources, people in Mulvane are taking action. Hundreds gathered for a second annual Walk for Mental Health last Saturday, doubling the turnout from its first year. Organizers say the goal is to bring crucial resources to the community, stressing that counseling and medication are not always available outside of larger cities. The event highlights a growing demand across the state for better access to government-supported mental wellness services, especially in rural areas of Kansas. Councilmember Hoheisel, I'll start with you first. You've been a strong advocate ever since we campaigned against each other for mental health assistance and mental health awareness. I'm sure you have lots to say about this.
Yeah, and again, going back to our earlier discussion, just the state of the world nowadays, stressors we have as far as scrolling online, social media. It's just a different world than any of us grew up in as far as that goes. We've done some things on the local level, expanded the ICT units. That's something we did agree on. There's still a lot of work to do, and I do feel for the rural communities because they have been seeing medical offices close a lot here lately. But those people are still under the same stress as we all are. Economic tailwinds that are not keeping us up with where we should be in life. So there's just so many stressors out there, and we got to do what we can to get back again to seeing the humanity in each other and helping each other out just on a personal level. That in itself will go a long way. But then also expanding access to health care of all sorts throughout our state.
Ben Davis, again, we talk about making more efficiencies, but it seems like we may have to spend more money, or it sounds like, to solve this problem.
Look, I mean, I think this is about priorities.
Sure.
And I would say that mental health it should be a priority, if nothing more than just awareness and having access to resources and things like that. And there are a lot of things beyond, government programs or government subsidized programs to bring awareness to it. I've dealt with that even in my own family. I said the other thing too that I would love to see some more initiatives on, and I know that they've done programs out of McConnell, and that's also just resilience training. So it's not just mental health, but it's also helping people become more resilient some things. I mean, some people go through difficult things, and it's not just, well, I experienced trauma, but also resiliency to be able to deal with that. And they have wonderful programs. I know that if they've done volunteer work at McConnell, a lot of people, they encourage going through resiliency programs. I'd love to see that, initiative like that in like Wichita Public Schools, things like that for kids to be able to go through that. Some people have really heavy mental health crises as a result of trauma. I don't want to downgrade that. Yeah. But sometimes it's, I'm feeling a little stuff on social media. It's like, okay, let's maybe help put this in perspective, and maybe it's more of a resiliency thing than a mental health crisis. And I think teaching people and teaching kids how to maybe separate through those things could be really, really helpful, and maybe again, not be as much of a strain on the mental health side.
And how do those services are great that you're talking about, how do we extend that to more rural communities though, even like people in Mulvane and even farther out in more rural communities?
No, that's
have
a good,
and
I mean, so Congressman of the Big First, Tracy Mann, I know just sponsored 3 different bills in the Congress dealing with mental health care. I'm actually running a campaign for a candidate, a special election in Tennessee, and he built a healthcare company that dealt with rural healthcare specifically for seniors in the marketplace. And a lot of it's just helping people navigate for resources that are already there. They just don't know it, and then helping them, especially with a lot of preventative medicine, things like that. So there are a lot of things things that can be done. What I would love to see is us encouraging the private market and private healthcare to start expanding more into these places. I need to be very careful what I say here. I don't think we're being served by having Blue Cross Blue Shield be the major monopoly player in this state.
Absolutely.
And I think we'd be better served by actually having a real healthcare market and not just one group that dominates everybody.
Yeah. Pilar, tell me your thoughts on this. Rural healthcare has been a problem for decades in Kansas.
And I have done stories on doctor deserts and maternity care deserts and, yes, rural mental health deserts. And we have a lot of them, along with food deserts, in what you might consider the breadbasket of our state, where we grow the majority of our food. And as a historian, what I look at is what started all of this. And really a lot of it was I don't want to say gentrification, the metropolization of our country, if you're following me, the urban flight, shall we say, toward cities and away from, and a lot, and the lack of support that there was for rural communities in the beginning. And now it is almost financially impossible to provide these small communities. I mean, I was down in Kiowa over the Labor Day weekend. It's a community of 900 people. It's a vibrant community, but they simply don't have the economic base to bring in what's needed. And a lot of it, I think, goes back to globalization. We talk about how the world has just gotten so much smaller, computers and social media and all of that. A lot of what it did was make people aware of what they were missing. You hear on social media about FOMO, fear of missing out. Yeah. Well, FOMO, I really think, is behind a lot of that flight toward the big cities, because people were afraid of missing out on what was going on there. They were afraid of missing out on the bigger salary, afraid of missing out on the more fun in the evenings, whatever. And so they flocked to the big cities, and now we're left with the mess that got left behind.
Let me give Dion the last word here with about a minute left here. We have seen some programs in other states that incentivize doctors and dentists to come to rural areas and stay.
Yeah, well, it's
Could
not.
that be a
mental health treatment is not great in the city here either.
Yeah.
I mean, we got a problem across the board with this, and it just there's an out of sight, out of mind aspect to this. If we don't have to look at them, they're not there.
Yeah.
And
all right, that's a wrap for this week. Thank you so much to Ben Davis, Dion Leffler, Pilar Pedraza, and Mike Hoheisel for being here. And thanks to KSN and our other news partners for sharing their materials with us. I'm Jared Cirillo. We'll see you again next week.